Hi everyone, Dave here at East Rosebud Fly and Tackle in Billings, Montana. I'm going to show you today how to tie the Batman Nymph, which is a very popular nymph here in the West. It's one of the purple series, I call them. It's really just a derivation of the beadhead Prince Nymph. We have some purple dubbing, counter wrapped with wire, different colored biots on it, and some rubber legs. So what I'm using is a 2x long nymph hook. This is a 1/8 inch tungsten bead, gold. Anytime, if you've never used a metal bead before, whether it's copper or brass or tungsten, you'll see that there's two different size holes drilled on it. There's a small end and then there's a large end. Without the large end, you wouldn't be able to make that turn on the hook shank. So you want to make sure you always insert your bead from the small end onto the hook and bring it up to the top. Since this is a weighted nymph, we're going to add some extra weight to it. You of course can always use a brass bead if you like, and use lead wire. This is 0.020 lead wire. For normal weighting, you want your lead wire to be about the same diameter as your hook shank. Now you can underweight it by using lighter wire, you can overweight it by using heavier wire. So I'm going to use 0.020 lead wire, and we're going to make about 8 wraps. All you have to do to use lead wire, trap it on the far side of the hook away from you, hold it with your finger, and just wrap it like thread. This hook shank is long enough that you can put more lead wraps. It's up to you. How fast do you want this nymph to sink? What type of water are you fishing it on? These tungsten carbide scissors are very handy for cutting wire. You don't want to cut with your good scissors. Clip that off, and then we'll get our tag ends, close them up, kind of mash them together here, and just use our thumbs to press it together. I like to bring the bead out to the wire to center it and then push it forward. I'm using 80 Vivus black thread because we're going to be doing some dubbing, a dubbing that I personally have a hard time with, ice dub. I like Vivus thread because it does have texture to it. It's polyester, so dubbing adheres to it well. Threads like UTC, which are good threads, they're nylon and they're very slick, and I have a hard time dubbing with them. We're going to build a thread dam here for 2 reasons. One, to keep the lead wire up against the bead, and secondly, to make the transition of our abdomen a little smoother. So we want a nice smooth dam here. Bring your thread to the end of the hook shank, which is right at the back of the barb. Now if you've watched the Prince Nymph video, you've seen how we tie on biots for tails. Show it again here. We're just using brown goose biots. If you're going to tie a lot of these, I suggest you don't pick off, and I do tweezer my biots off so I get the extra length. I suggest you don't cut any more than about 6 off at a time, because as you go down the biot, the shape, the width, the length of these change. So if you pick off 2 dozen biots and you mix them up, you may not have 2 that are the same size. So I like to pull them off right next to each other. We're going to orient these so the tips, the natural curve, face outwards. To do that, you just get them back to back, cross them in your fingers, and then just kind of scissors them. Make sure that they're parallel down the entire length. Even up the tips. As typical on these nymphs, we want our tails to be about half a hook shank long. You grab it at that point. If you'll split the biots over the hook shank so that they cross it, hold it slightly on top of the hook and slightly to your side. Hold the tails firmly. Bring 1 loose wrap over the top of them. As you cinch it down, the thread torque will pull those biots up to the top of the hook. Make a couple of more tight wraps before we release them. Make sure that they're even, that they're how we like them. And like on any abdomen, we want to try to keep this smooth. So we'll wrap over the butts of these biots just about to the beginning of the thread dam. Then we'll clip these off close and continue to wrap a nice smooth abdomen. Now this particular pattern has a counter wrapping of blue wire. What I'm using for this hook size is brassy blue ultra wire. I'm going to wrap this wire in a conventional manner. Since it's a dubbed body and not a palmered hackle, I'm not really concerned about supporting the body so that it doesn't come apart. So I'm going to tie it in about midway up the lead wraps on the far side of the hook and wrap back over it tightly. Keep your bobbin close to the hook shank so you don't catch that hook barb. We're going to bring it all the way back to where our tails begin, and then a couple of wraps forward before we dub it. Now for the dubbing, I'm using UV Purple Ice Dub. And I will admit freely that with the synthetic dubbings, this is about the maximum that I can direct dub, simply because it requires a lot of pressure to dub this tightly. And what with hand surgeries and arthritis, it's difficult for me to dub directly some of these really large synthetic fibers. So I use a lot of dubbing wax. I like the hairline low tack wax. It's just got the right amount of stickiness to it without being greasy. And for me, the best way for me to dub, ice dub, is to take just a few strands at a time and really put as much pressure as you can. Take a few more strands, overlap what you previously dubbed, and again, really put the pressure on. The thinner your dubbed strand is, the more control you have over it when you wrap it over the hook. And plus a tightly dubbed body will hold together much longer. So we'll just dub a couple of inches at a time. Any more than that, you end up hitting yourself in the nose as you wrap it. We're going to come back and wrap so that our dubbing starts right at the tail. And we want to dub a tight, tapered body all the way up to behind the bead. And apply a little bit more. It's always easier to add dubbing than it is to take it off. So go slow. And really put some pressure on it. Want to continue to get a nice tapered abdomen. Cover our underbody well. If you see me swatting at something, it's not because I'm spastic, it's just that our shop fly has revisited us back here and seems to want to land on my nose. Alright, lots of pressure, and we continue to wrap a nice smooth body that tapers a little bit as we go forward. And we'll end up behind the bead with bare threads, pardon me. Then we'll just simply get our wire, bring it out 90 degrees. You can put as many wraps as you want on it. The segmentation, of course, is supposed to simulate the segmentation of an insect larva or a nymph. We're going to wind this through nice and tight. Of course, you can cut your wire off a couple different ways. If you've got tungsten carbide scissors, you can simply cut it. Helicoptering it, I always like 3 tight thread wraps. I find that anything less than 3 thread wraps and the wire wants to walk its way back around. Hold your thread tight, grab your wire close to the body, and just make a couple of large helicopter twists, and it breaks right off. Alright, we're going to bring our thread back just a couple of wraps. We're going to use soft hackle, simulate some movement on this fly. This is just a hen saddle hackle. We want the right size so that we have about 1.5 hook gaps length of hackle. I'll show you a little different way. I mean, it's basically tying in a soft hackle. I'll show you a little different way. Instead of tying it in by the tip, we're going to tie it in by the butt end. What I like to do is cut some of the hackles off, not quite up to the quill. What this does is it gives us a little bit more to grab onto when we tie it on. So we want the concave side down, the shiny side up. We're going to tie in the butt of the hackle, and we're going to wrap back towards the back of the hook to where our hackle starts. Now this is a method that takes some practice, and I will admit that I'm not as good at it as I'd like to be. But folding hackle makes for a much nicer looking fly. When you hold your hackle with your hackle pliers, make sure you have the center stem. Not by the tip, make sure you've got a good grip on the stem. And by wetting your fingers a little bit and holding this erect, and again this takes practice, try to fold these hackles back. Fold them back towards the dull side. That's the way they naturally want to fold. I could mess with this for 15 minutes and never get it perfect, but you get the idea. So as we wrap this hackle, we're going to wrap it forward to where our thread is. As we go, we want to try to fold this hackle back. We only need a couple of wraps here. Bring your hackle over, bring your thread over, bring your hackle straight up. That way you get to the actual stem and you get a much tighter tie down. So that's a little different way for you to tie in your soft hackle. Alright, this also has some rubber legs on it. What I'm using is Barred Sexy Floss. It's the small size, purple. We're just going to cut off a single strand. And Barred Sexy Floss does have flat sides on it, and I like to try to tie it in the flat side against the hook so that it stands out a little bit. And now we're right in front of the hackle. We're still a couple of thread wraps behind the bead. I'm going to lay this in slightly towards the top, make a loose wrap, and let the thread carry it around to the far side. I'm going to make sure it's right on the side, pinch it, make a second wrap over there to hold it in place. The leg length is variable, it's up to you. And we'll do the same thing on this side, except when we put the rubber leg against the side of the hook, we're going to hold it a little down from center, and again let the thread wrap carry it up over the top. Now you can adjust it, make sure you've got the flat side down and it's on the side of the hook, and then make a couple of more tight thread wraps. Hold everybody together. So one small piece of leg, we were able to do both sides without any problems. This particular pattern finishes off with black biot on the top instead of the white biot that you're used to on the Prince Nymph. And we want to get down on the biot far enough where we have long enough biots to work with. And we're going to take two of them off again, pull them off with tweezers, pull them off right next to each other so they'll be the same size. And these we're going to tie in of a delta wing style, which is like a pair of scissors, not completely closed. I'm going to even up these tips. Try to get the tips even. We'd like to get about a 30-degree angle or so. And typically these biots will extend to just about the end of the body. I like to try to get my intersection point exactly where I'm going to tie them in. And we want to get them right on top of the hook. They're slick, they're hard, so pinch them down hard with your thumb. We're tying these right over where we tied in our rubber legs. 3 nice tight wraps. So you have that. Now I forgot to bring my curved iris scissors, but I have a pair of scissors that I really like for cutting things off right next to the bead. We want to trim these off just as close as we can without cutting our thread. The nice thing about a black biot and black thread, it really doesn't show when you whip finish. That's handy. Now what we're going to do is whip finish, and because this material is slick, I like to go ahead and do a double 3-wrap whip finish. Try to keep your thread band as narrow as you can. You can always supply head cement if you like, but I have found that a double whip finish never comes untied. There you have it, the Batman Nymph. Very popular around here. As always, if you have any questions, any comments, any criticisms, please let us know. Thanks for joining in. We'll see you next time.